Throughout its long history, our Earth has been inhabited by completely different life forms. Some of them seemed like fantastic creatures incarnate, while others would seem more or less familiar to us. Dinosaurs were undoubtedly the most famous and impressive creatures of the past, of course. They dominated the Earth's biosphere for a remarkable 145 million years, giving rise to countless species and forms. However, around 66 million years ago, our planet once again changed its inhabitants. Following a global disaster, the details of which are still largely obscure, virtually all animals weighing more than 25 kilograms were wiped off the face of the Earth in an extremely short period of time by geological standards. The abandoned wastelands were quickly occupied by new inhabitants, mammals. In the relentless struggle for survival, ever new species developed, until a unique creature appeared on the scene. Instead of adapting to the relentless nature, it decided to adapt nature to its own needs. It certainly wasn't the biggest, strongest, or fastest creature, but how did it become the queen of all nature? The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event marked the beginning of a new geological era, the Cenozoic. It began 66 million years ago and is still ongoing. Throughout this period, the Earth's surface underwent global transformations and offered its expanses to a vast multitude of extraordinary creatures. The first period of the new era was dubbed the Paleogene. It began immediately after the disaster that wiped out the dinosaurs and lasted 43 million years. During this period, the face of our planet changed radically. India crossed the ocean and reached the southern coast of Asia. The Himalayas soared to the heavens, and Antarctica began to form its immense ice shield. In the first 10 million years, Earth's biosphere was recovering from the fatal blow. With the disappearance of their former masters, agile and lively mammals rapidly spread into the ecological niches they had vacated. In search of new forms, life evolved and produced the Androsarchus duo, the gigantic and rigid Indracotherium, and the aquatic Archaeocetes, the prehistoric ancestors of today's whales. Many of these fascinating creatures disappeared without a trace, while others evolved to adapt to changing conditions. About 23 million years ago, the Paleogene was followed by the Neogene, which lasted about 20 million years. It is divided into two unequal epochs, the longer of which is called the Miocene. It was a period of slow and steady cooling. In its place, vast plains covered in salt desert remained. According to some estimates, temperatures in some areas reached 80 degrees Celsius, while the atmospheric pressure at the bottom of this basin was more than 1.5 times higher than what we are used to. Only a few small lakes with extremely salty water were scattered across the desolate and lifeless desert. At that time, the vast expanses of our planet were home to a multitude of bizarre creatures. Gigantopithecus, a huge ape related to orangutans, standing over 3 meters tall and weighing up to half a ton, roamed the dense rainforests of Asia. Entelodon, a bull-sized ungulate predator and scavenger, terrorized the steppe dwellers. The strait between the two continents was interrupted by the Isthmus of Panama, blocking the passage of warm ocean waters. Around the same time, the Rocky Mountains rose significantly, thus forming a barrier between the Atlantic and Pacific air currents. Due to all these factors combined, the Earth gradually cooled and some parts of it became covered in ice. This is what ancient primates agreed upon. They adapted very well to a tree-climbing lifestyle. However, global climate change has destroyed much of Africa's forests. Easily digestible fruits and plants were rare in the savanna, and rough grass and leaves were inedible to primates. Reaching for animal food became essential for survival. However, successful hunting required speed and strength, and this was precisely what our ancestors lacked. Forming small tribes, the new inhabitants of the savanna could hunt, or at least forcibly steal prey from other predators. It is assumed that the need to coordinate actions in this process stimulated the development of the primitive brain and language. A gradual evolution over the course of several million years bestowed human characteristics on the great apes Ardipithecus and Sahelanthropus. Thus was born Australopithecus. This agile, intelligent, but not very large creature appeared in Africa between 4.2 and 1.8 million years ago. Analysis of their fossil remains revealed that they stood 120 to 140 centimeter tall and weighed about 40 kilograms. Unlike other primates, Australopithecus moved primarily on two legs, though its posture remained hunched. As for its brain, although larger than that of apes, the differences in its internal composition were minimal. It is known that Australopithecus lived in tribes and could cooperate to hunt and fight enemies. Research shows that primitive species used only readily available objects, while later species learned to make the most basic and primitive tools for work and defense. Despite this, most individuals did not survive past 20 years of age due to illness, injuries, and attacks by wild animals. Apparently, the predators of that time considered Australopithecines exclusively as a food source. At the time, Dinophilus, a large saber-toothed cat distantly related to the later Smilodontians, was present. Excavations revealed that it preferred to live close to Australopithecus infants. It clearly considered them easy prey. Slightly larger than modern leopards, Dinophilus was stockier and more powerful. Weighing up to 120 kilograms, these predators stood about 70 cm tall. It is almost impossible to fight this type of animal alone, and our ancestors could probably only have driven it away with a joint effort. Of course, Dinophilus didn't just hunt Australopithecines. Antelopes and wild boars, for example, were also part of its diet. Most animals that inhabited the earth at that time resembled today's species. These distant relatives of elephants are thought to have inhabited the forests of Asia and Africa, feeding primarily on foliage. Their trunks were likely shorter and thicker than those of elephants, and their most striking feature is the long, massive tusks protruding from their lower jaws. 2,588,000 years ago, a dramatic event occurred, known as the Gorse-Matayama reversal. The Earth's magnetic poles swapped positions, and all magnetic lines changed direction. This transformation was accompanied by a weakening of the planet's magnetic field, which was reduced fourfold. This meant that cosmic rays, lethal to all living things, could now reach the Earth's surface. It began 2,588,000 years ago and ended just 12,000 years ago. Periodic cooling accompanied by the growth of ice sheets was typical of the climate of that period. Between ice ages, temperatures increased and the ice sheets melted, causing sea levels to rise. These frequent climate fluctuations forced living beings to adapt rapidly to the changes and stimulated the evolutionary process. Gradually evolving, Australopithecines gave rise to two major primate lineages: Paranthropus, a now extinct genus, and Homo, among others represented by modern humans. However, the three lineages coexisted for a considerable period in the competitive conditions of a struggle for survival. The evolutionary path from higher primates to humans has not been linear or clear-cut. There have been many dead ends and forks in the road. At least 24 different species have populated our planet at different times, all of whose representatives could be defined as human in one way or another. The evolutionary process of humans and our ancestors is constantly being scrutinized, and details are constantly being updated. It's important to remember that evolution is a very slow process. It takes at least 2-3 million years for species to completely diverge and interbreed to give rise to viable hybrids. Meanwhile, the entire history of Homo, the genus that includes the current human species, amounts to about 2.5 million years. Considering our most ancient ancestors, this figure could have practically doubled. Furthermore, many populations inhabited adjacent areas, meaning that many hybrids likely existed in the natural world. Interestingly, it was the first creature whose big toe lined up with the other toes, as is the case in modern humans. This could be seen as evidence of a complete adaptation to an upright posture. Another important parameter was the structure of the jaws, which could indicate a gradually developing capacity for articulated speech. Subsequently, evolution produced Homo agaster, or working man, about 2 million years ago, and Homo erectus, or upright man. Various scientists classify them as related evolutionary branches or subspecies of a single species. During migrations, these representatives of the human race settled in Africa, Asia, and Europe, stimulating numerous evolutionary branches. One of these eventually gave rise to Homo sapiens. Ancient humans, whether Neanderthals or Homo sapiens, lived in tribes and practiced a nomadic lifestyle. Living by hunting and gathering, they were forced to constantly migrate and move to new, unexplored areas. In this way, primitive tribes gradually settled on every continent except Antarctica. Around 50,000 years ago, exploration of Australia began, and around 24,000 years ago, humans first reached North America across the Bering Isthmus. The spread of primitive tribes across the globe coincided with the mass extinctions of megafauna in the Pleistocene. Between 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, mammoths and the giant ground sloth Megatherium disappeared from the face of the earth, followed by saber-toothed tigers and other predators unable to withstand the fierce competition for food. Humans might have met the same fate, but about 12,000 years ago, an ice age ended, and our planet's climate became warmer and wetter. The fertile valleys of Mesopotamia and the Nile estuary allowed our ancestors to pursue a non-migratory foraging lifestyle and later to form fully fledged agricultural communities after the so-called Neolithic Revolution. This marked the end of the Pleistocene, marking the beginning of a new era in our planet's history. The Holocene was a period of robust growth in human civilization, technological and social progress, destructive wars, and ecological disasters. By choosing a unique evolutionary path, humans took their first steps into entirely new and unexplored territories beyond our planet. Only time will tell where this path will lead. Dear friends, the topic of human origin is still full of mysteries and unsolved secrets. If you have anything to say about it, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your active participation is very important to us as we put our heart and soul into each new episode and strive to make it interesting and informative. We're always happy to receive your likes and positive comments. This motivates us to make new videos faster. Stay in touch.